What if the first thing you do each morning is the very reason your soul keeps forgetting why it came here? Not because it's wrong, but because it's rushed, unseen, unfelt, like a sacred door we pass through without ever bowing. You see, most people wake up and move as if waking was an obligation. They rise as if the body is ready simply because the eyes have opened. But I've learned through years of silence, of stillness, of suffering, that the moment you wake is the most delicate conversation you will ever have with yourself. And how you answer that moment determines everything that follows. I'm not here to teach. I'm only here to remember with you 4 quiet mistakes, 4 soft betrayals we commit without malice. But each one carries a cost measured not in hours, but in life unlived. Stay with me until the end. Not for answers, but for the part of yourself you've forgotten how to greet. Now, let me begin with a man named Edward, and a morning that began like any other, until it didn't. We start with the first mistake, the one hidden inside the simple act of rising too fast. The rushed awakening, getting out of bed too quickly. The way you rise each morning reveals how gently you've learned to live with impermanence. Edward wasn't reckless, he was loyal. Loyal to a younger version of himself. To the man who once rose like the sun, with no hesitation, no doubt, no pain. He had a rhythm, deeply memorized, eyes open, legs over the edge, feet on the ground. Done in one motion. For decades, it served him. Until the morning it didn't. He stood up, just as he always had. But the world tilted not metaphorically, but literally. His vision blurred, his knees gave way, and down he went. He didn't break a bone. But something did break that morning. His illusion of timeless strength. His belief that aging was just a number. He sat on the edge of the bed afterward, head in his hands, not because of pain, but because of betrayal. Not by anyone else but by his own body, the same body that had once climbed mountains, lifted children, danced in kitchens, and outrun storms. That morning, Edward heard a voice quiet and unfamiliar. I can't keep up with your memory of me. As we grow older, our bodies don't fail us, they transform. They become slower, yes, but also more sensitive, more fragile, and in many ways, more honest. In Buddhist teaching, this is Anicca impermanence. Nothing stays the same. Not youth. Not pain. Not even our own reflection in the mirror. When we resist this truth, suffering arises. When we embrace it, wisdom blooms. There is something holy about the way an old man should rise. Not like a soldier reporting for duty, but like a monk stepping barefoot into a temple at dawn. I have learned, in these later years, to treat my mornings as sacred ground. Not because of fear but because of reverence. Here's what my morning looks like now. I wake slowly, often with my hand resting on my chest. Feeling the rhythm. Grateful it's still there. I lie still for a moment, not out of weakness, but out of respect. I whisper to myself, you're still here. Let's not rush that. Then, I wiggle my fingers. Not just for circulation, but for presence. I notice which joints are stiff, which muscles speak. I roll gently to my side, never abruptly. I feel the weight of my own body. I acknowledge it. Then, when I'm ready, not a second before I sit up, I let my feet dangle. I wait. I breathe. I check if the room is spinning. I check if my soul has caught up with my body. Only then do I stand. Not like a man late for work, but like an elder returning to earth after a quiet flight through dreams. You see, we've been taught all our lives that slowness equals weakness. But that's a lie built by a world addicted to speed. The truth is, slowness is wisdom dressed in stillness. It's not that we're no longer capable of rushing. It's that we've finally understood it's no longer necessary. Every time I rise slowly, I'm sending myself a message. You're worthy of care, even from yourself. You're not in a race. You're in a moment. Edward and I spoke months later. I asked him what changed after the fall. He smiled, thin-lipped but warm, and said, "I no longer leap. I linger. I let the day invite me. And I always answer gently." That one sentence stayed with me. Because truly, the way we rise, becomes a metaphor for how we meet the world. Rushing out of bed is like barging into a sacred conversation before it begins. But when you rise with breath, with softness, with attention, you are offering a prayer with your body. So if you've woken up this morning, and your body feels slower than your memories, that's okay. It's not betrayal. It's invitation. An invitation to love yourself differently. To rise with grace. To meet the new day not with force but with friendship. And perhaps those first 10 seconds, the ones we used to waste, are actually the most important ritual of all. Because in them, you whisper something profound without ever speaking a word. I am still here. And today, I will walk slowly, but I will walk with care. The forgotten water, skipping hydration. The first kindness you offer in the day should be to yourself, and it begins with a sip. There's a certain silence just before dawn, when the birds have yet to sing and even the floorboards hesitate to creak. That's when I reach for the glass of water I keep beside my bed. Not coffee. Not juice. Just water, simple, still, patient. It waits for me, like an old friend who never raises their voice. And in that first sip, there is something sacred. A return. A reunion between body and spirit. James never believed in rituals. Not the spiritual kind, not the health kind. He was a soldier, a pragmatist. Coffee first, then I think, he'd say with a wink. And for years, it worked. Until it didn't. At 76, he began to feel slower. Not old. Not broken. Just slower, in ways that were hard to describe. His mind took longer to wake. His knees ached more. His breath felt shallower. And when I asked him how he started his mornings, he said, "Same as always. Wake up, wash my face, drink my coffee. No time to fuss with water." I looked at him gently. "You're not fussing, James. You're neglecting." He laughed. Then paused. And a week later, he called me. "I drank a glass of water before coffee this morning. Felt strange. But good. Real good." That call was the beginning of his second morning. The truth is, we lose water even while we sleep. Through every exhale, every breath that escapes into the night. Our body works in silence while we rest, repairing, cleansing, dreaming. And by morning, it asks for something in return. Not food. Not caffeine. Just water. But we ignore it. We reach for stimulation instead of restoration. We pour coffee into an empty vessel and call it normal. Yet if you listen carefully, your body pleads. "Before you ask me to wake, give me what I've lost. Before you fill me with thoughts, fill me with what keeps me alive." Buddhism teaches Karuna, compassion. And too often, we confuse compassion with grand gestures toward others. But the first act of compassion must always be inward. To drink water upon waking isn't about hydration. It's about reverence. It's a way of saying to your body, "I see you. I remember you. Thank you for carrying me through another night." Let me tell you what that simple act has become for me. I don't just drink, I bless the act. I hold the glass with 2 hands, like a monk holds a bowl. I let the water touch my lips slowly. I feel the coolness reach down into my belly. It's not just water. It's the first piece of the day. Before the noise. Before the news. Before the aches and lists and obligations. It is the first moment that belongs entirely to me. And I'll be honest. There were mornings when I thought it made no difference. But then I noticed. My mind was clearer. My legs steadier. My breath deeper. My day, gentler. Not because of magic, but because I began the day in harmony rather than in demand. Now, if you're someone who forgets water in the morning, I don't blame you. We live in a world that worships convenience over care. But I invite you, no, I urge you to try this. Keep a small glass by your bed. Don't wait to feel thirsty. Don't wait to move. Sip. Slowly. With your eyes still half closed, like you're sipping light itself. Warm water with lemon, if you prefer. Or just cool, pure water, silent and sincere. And as it moves down your throat, imagine it waking up each cell. Imagine it saying, "We begin again, old friend. Let's go gently." You see, we can't control how fast we age. But we can choose how lovingly we respond. And every morning, before you speak to the world, before you scroll, before you rise, you have one sacred chance to say to yourself, "I'm still alive. I still matter. And I will treat this body as something I am borrowing from the earth, not something I own." That sip of water is a reminder. A reminder that before you nourish the world, you must nourish the life inside you. The coffee trap, caffeine on an empty stomach. You don't need to be jolted awake, you need to be welcomed back into yourself. There was a time when I believed coffee was a kind of religion. It had its ritual, the kettle singing like a morning hymn, the cup warmed by waiting hands, the steam rising like prayers unspoken. I wasn't alone. Roberts, an old friend, a writer with ink-stained fingers and insomnia in his bones, used to say, "I write best with bitterness on my tongue." He drank his coffee black. No sugar. No milk. No food. He believed the sharpness sharpened him. That it gave his mind edge. Fire. Urgency. And perhaps it did. For a time. But time, as we know, changes the chemistry of everything, especially the body. By 75, the words that once flowed from him like a rushing stream began to slow. Not because the thoughts were gone, but because his digestion, his heart, his energy, they were strained. Strained by years of waking up the mind before feeding the body. You see, coffee is not the villain. It is the timing that makes the difference. A cup of coffee on an empty stomach is like thunder with no rain. It strikes. It shakes. It startles. But it doesn't nourish. When you wake, your body is in a tender state. Your blood sugar is low. Your cortisol, the stress hormone, is already at its peak. And then we pour in caffeine quick, hot, acidic. We ask our stomachs to bear the burden of awakening us, before we've offered them anything in return. Buddhist teaching calls this tanha craving. We crave stimulation. We crave to feel awake, sharp, ready. But the Dharma reminds us, even craving for clarity can lead to suffering. I've seen it happen. Not just in others, in myself. There were mornings when my heart would race before my feet hit the ground. Not from exertion, but from that bitter jolt of coffee. I'd feel a queasy emptiness not just in the belly, but in the mind. It took me years to realize. I wasn't starting my day, I was assaulting it. And I paid the price. Acid reflux. Restlessness. Energy spikes followed by deep, unexpected crashes. A sense of being awake, but not centered. So I changed. Not by abandoning coffee, but by changing my relationship to it. Now, I begin with food, not much. A slice of toast. A banana. A handful of almonds. Nothing heavy. Just an offering to the body that carried me through the night. Only then do I sip my coffee. And suddenly, it no longer feels like a command. It feels like companionship. You see, Coffee is not meant to jolt you, it is meant to join you. And when it arrives gently, after the body has been acknowledged, it becomes something else entirely. A comfort. A conversation. A moment of quiet fire, instead of a roaring flame. I remember telling Roberts this one morning, when his hands had begun to tremble after years of black coffee on an empty gut. He looked at me and said, "You mean? I've been writing before feeding the writer." Exactly. Your body, dear friend, is not your servant. It is your home. And even the most sacred routines must bow to kindness. Here's what I offer you. Before you reach for the mug, reach for mercy. Ask yourself, have I honored my hunger? Have I greeted my belly with softness, before demanding it to digest sharpness? Eat something first. Not out of guilt, but out of gratitude. And then drink slowly. Let the warmth wrap around your ribs. Let it sit beside your heart, not above it. Let it remind you that energy should arrive gently, not violently. Because at this age, we don't need to be shaken awake. We need to be invited back into the moment. Not startled into the day, but welcomed by it. And when you honor your body before you caffeinate your mind, you are no longer rushing toward awareness. You are moving with it. And that is the kind of awakening that doesn't just last until noon. It lasts a lifetime. The ignored ache, moving too fast despite stiffness. The body stiffens not because it's broken, but because it's asking you to listen. Walter was always the strong one. The kind of man who mended fences with bare hands, who split logs like he was slicing butter, even at 78. His back was straight, his stride steady. He still believed in movement, the kind that says, "I'm not done yet." But one morning, his legs didn't agree. He got out of bed, took a step toward the bathroom, just one. And the tightness he'd always dismissed became something else entirely. A fall. A fracture. And a silence that stretched across months of recovery. It wasn't the pain that undid him. It was the realization. All the signs were there. But I didn't listen. You see, stiffness in the morning isn't a betrayal. It's not the enemy. It's the body speaking in whispers. A language we were never taught to understand. Most of us were raised to push through. To get up and get going. To ignore the ache. To treat the body as a machine instead of a miracle. But at a certain age, you no longer outrun stiffness. You must sit with it. You must ask it, softly. What are you trying to teach me today? What have I ignored in your silence? Because every joint, every muscle, every creak is a messenger. And the message is this. Slow down, or I will slow you down. In Buddhism, this is the truth of dukkha suffering. But not the dramatic kind. It's the quiet, creeping kind that grows from resistance. Resisting rest. Resisting breath. Resisting the simple truth that healing and motion must walk together, hand in hand. Each morning now, I begin with a ritual. Not out of discipline, but out of love. I don't just wake up, I wake into awareness. Still lying in bed, I take a breath. Then I move my toes like I'm testing the waters of the world. My ankles roll in slow, deliberate circles. My knees rise one at a time like a slow tide returning to shore. I stretch not to force flexibility but to greet myself. Like a dear friend I haven't seen since yesterday. And when I sit up, I don't reach for speed, I reach for stillness. I pause. I feel. I give my spine time to adjust to the weight of gravity again. Only then, when my body agrees, do I stand. Not proudly. Not quickly. But honestly. There's an art to slowness. It's not laziness. It's listening. Walter learned this too late. But you don't have to. He told me once, during his recovery. I treated my strength like it would always be there. But strength changes shape. Sometimes, it looks like stillness. That sentence struck me like a bell in an empty temple. It echoed. Because we don't lose strength as we age. We redefine it. Strength becomes saying not yet to movement. Taking 5 breaths before your first step. Leaning on a wall not out of weakness but out of wisdom. Choosing safety over speed. Choosing presence over performance. There's something no one tells you about growing old. You no longer have to prove anything. You don't have to rise like you're being chased. You don't have to move like you're behind. You can let the world wait, because your peace matters more than its pace. So if you wake and feel stiffness in your shoulders, or in your back, or behind your knees like an old memory returning, don't ignore it. Place your hand there. Close your eyes. Say, I hear you. Then move softly, as if you're tending to a sacred animal. Because that's what the body becomes with age. Sacred. Fragile. Powerful. Not in resistance, but in relationship. A few final movements I always offer before I stand. A breath to connect. A smile to soften. A stretch to listen. These aren't exercises. They're blessings. I bless this old body with patience. I bless it for showing up imperfect, yet faithful. Walter walks again now. But he walks differently. Not to arrive faster, but to feel deeper. He walks like a man who survived his own ignoring. And I rise as if the morning were a temple. Because it is. And the body is the doorway. Open it slowly. Step through with reverence. And leave your old habits of rushing outside like dirty shoes. They say after 70, the body breaks down. But I've found it finally speaks clearly. Not in words. But in slower steps, deeper silences, and mornings that ask for permission before they begin. And in those moments, we discover. The way you wake is the way you live. With gentleness or with resistance. With listening or with noise. You don't need a temple to practice mindfulness. You only need a quiet moment. And the courage to treat yourself like someone worth waiting for. If this voice felt like a mirror to your own, stay. Leave a comment. Not to be seen, but to remember. You're still here. And that alone is a miracle. And if your heart whispered, I needed this, don't walk away. Subscribe to Whisper of Age. Let these gentle truths meet you, again and again. Like the morning light you no longer rush into, but wait for, with reverence. And if you remember nothing else, let it be this. It's never too late to begin your day differently. And become someone softer than who you were yesterday.